Some of the most heroic people I know are people I know. And I know that sounds a little odd, but man, I think sometimes we walk with this mindset that says in order to make a difference in the world, I have to be someone with a massive platform or a politician or some superstar famous athlete, and it's just not true. Today we're going to talk about how God has called you to be an ordinary hero. Let's go. Well, today, like I said, we're kicking off this brand new series. We're calling it, we're calling it Ordinary Heroes. And here's what we're going to do over the next 5 weeks or so, or 4 weeks if you don't count today. We are going to walk through the story of Esther. Esther is an Old Testament book, a short book, just 10 chapters, but it highlights a few really wonderful people, really wonderful characters that I think teach us some really valuable lessons that we can apply to our lives today. The primary sort of takeaway, at least for me, from the book of Esther and the story of Esther is that God uses like regular people like you and me, and he can do really extraordinary things with them. And so there are two reasons why I wanted to do this series, kicking it off today and sort of in this season. And the first reason is this, because today we are celebrating Disability Ministry Sunday. Now, if you've been around for any period of time, I guess I would say over the last 4 or 5 years, it's become like one of our favorite Sundays of the year every year, where on Disability Ministry Sunday, we'll sort of pull out all the stops. There'll be balloons falling from the ceiling. We'll kick beach balls around the room, hit beach balls around the room. We have choirs, and we have all sorts of different things that we do with our disability ministry community. But because of COVID, we had to, kind of change how we do it. So it's not as over the top this year, but it doesn't change the fact that here at FCC, we live by a mantra, Jesus for all people, and we really believe that. And I would say that First Christian Church has one of the best disability ministries, and not only Canton, not only Ohio, but I would say in the entire country. It is something that we truly value doing ministry for, but I would say even more with our friends with disabilities. And so today is a day that we try to set aside and say, man, we just want to honor our friends that we get to do ministry with. And so I know it's not what it normally is, but can we just celebrate our friends here at FCC really quick? That are part of our disability ministry program. So if you didn't know, we have a day services program that runs throughout the week, Monday through Friday. And then, of course, we have our amazing ministries that we do on Sunday mornings and throughout the week that are led by Tim, our disability ministry pastor. And so it's fantastic. It's awesome. And so, again, I just felt like, man, these are people that we do life with. These are people that we love. These are our family members. These are our brothers, our sisters, aunts, our uncles. These are people that we work with, that we do ministry with. These are ordinary heroes, just like you and me. Here's the second reason that I wanted to kick this series off today, is because in a couple weeks, we are going to go and we're going to vote for a guy named Trump, or we're going to vote for a guy named Biden, or maybe you're going to write someone in. I don't know how you're going to navigate that, but I said this a couple weeks ago in a sermon, and I'll hit it again here today. If the most important thing or the most impactful thing that you do this year is go and push a button and cast a vote for somebody, then it kind of hurts my heart just a little bit. And here's why. It's not that there isn't significance, validity, and power in practicing voting in our democracy. Of course, that's powerful. And of course, these people are being voted for significant reasons. They're going to be the president of the United States. But I believe that the things that we do throughout the week, I believe that the things we do above and beyond acts like that have even more significance. And here's why I believe that. Let me tell you just a few stories. See, in 1955, a young African-American woman got onto a bus. A few minutes later, a white man walks onto the bus, and she is supposed to give up her seat to him, but refuses to do so. With this act, the civil rights movement started. Rosa Parks was an ordinary hero, just a woman who refused to give up her seat on a bus. And she changed the world. Here's another story about an Albanian nun. She spent 70 years serving the least of these, 70 years serving lepers, 70 years just ministering to people as they're living out their last days on earth. And you and I know her as Mother Teresa, but this is just a woman who said, I just want to serve people. I'll tell you one more story. You probably don't recognize this name. Maybe some of you will, but a guy named Alexander Fleming. In 1928, Alexander Fleming was a scientist, just a regular guy studying the influenza virus. And as he's studying influenza, he stumbles accidentally upon this thing called penicillin. He takes the next 10, 12 years or so working with other scientists. They develop it further. They take it out to the masses, and you know the rest. Millions of people's of lives are saved in the process. On accident, just a normal guy doing his job, saves millions of people. That's why we're doing this series, because I want you to know that your life is significant, that the things that you do matter. Not just the people that you appoint to do things, but the things that you do matter. You are a hero. You are an ordinary hero. And so again, we're going to look at the story of Esther. Here's how we're going to do this. In just a minute, I have some helpers who are going to come out onto the stage with me, and they're going to kind of walk with me through this story. But today I'm going to tell the entire story of Esther. And then in the following 4 weeks, we're going to kind of break it down into different parts and dig a little deeper into different aspects of the story. But today, again, I'm just going to kind of tell the story. And so before we do that, I want to introduce you to the 4 main characters. Let's start with this guy. His name's Xerxes. Now, Xerxes is the king of Persia. Let's go back even just a little bit further. See, there's a moment in history where God's people, the Jews, have been a little bit disobedient, like repeatedly disobedient. They've been turning away from God, turning away from God, turning away from God. And finally, God is like, man, you guys are not paying attention. So God allows, he does this from time to time, not a lot, but from time to time, he allows this pagan empire, the Babylonians, to come in and to overthrow Jerusalem. And the Babylonians capture the Jews there in Jerusalem, and they take many of the Jews with them back to Babylon. This is called the Babylonian exile. And they leave Jerusalem in ruins, just kind of sitting there, just torn to the ground. It's heartbreaking, right? This is God's city, God's people. And so the Jews are taken to Babylon. Well, over time, another empire comes in and takes over the Babylonians, the Persians. And so what you find now is you have the Persian Empire with a mixture of maybe some Babylonians mixed in there, but then you've certainly got all these Jews who are living there in the Persian Empire, and they've just kind of made peace with it. They're like, this is our home, I guess, and they've just started to live there among. And so here's what we again need to understand. We have different backgrounds, different like cultural contexts, different identities, different religious practices, although the Jews are starting to forget some of the practices that they would do back in Jerusalem. And so this is sort of the existence. And so again, what we find in the story, again, 4 main characters. You have Xerxes, the king of Persia, a pagan king, not a great guy, okay, maybe not the worst, but definitely not a great guy, okay? And then we have this guy named Haman. Haman is the king's number 2. Haman is the prime minister, in our context, like the vice president, right? And Haman has a lot of power, but he doesn't have any power that's not given to him from the king. Haman hates the Jews and wants to eradicate them. We'll get to that in the story. Then we have our 2, good people in the story. The first is a guy named Mordecai. Mordecai is just a good Jewish man living there in Persia, just a good man, wants to do right. He has a niece, a young woman named Esther, who he's adopted because she went through some things, that he's taken her in and basically raised Esther. And so this is Mordecai, just a good, ordinary guy. And then there's Esther. Esther, again, just a young Jewish woman. The only thing that would be any extraordinary with Esther is that she's just really beautiful. She's just extremely, extremely beautiful. And so again, these are our 4 main characters: Xerxes, Haman, the bad guys. Xerxes is kind of whatever. Haman's the real bad guy. And then we have, again, Mordecai and Esther. So here's how we're going to do this. Like I said, I'm going to tell the whole story. But in order to do this, it's going to be a little bit theatrical, okay? I'm going to bring out some helpers. So here's what I need you guys to do is I need you to give a big round of applause to my 2 daughters, Story and Journey, and their best friend, McVale. So can you give a big round of applause to them? Okay. So you guys come over here. Okay, so this is my daughter, Journey. Okay, Journey, wave hi. Everyone say, hey, Journey. All right, this is McVale. McVale, say hi. Peace, what's up? All right, cool. And this is Story. Story, say hi. This is my daughter, Story. Okay, so they're going to be kind of here's how we're going to do this. I'm just going to be the narrator, and kind of I'll be Xerxes too. But I'm going to be the narrator. And as I'm telling the story, they're going to just sort of improv, act it out, okay? Do we have any props that we need to get first? Do we need to get our props? Our props? I'll get the props. Okay, so Journey on the end there, you guys stay there. Journey on the end there is going to be Esther. And then McVale, in the middle there, McVale's going to be Haman, evil Haman, okay? And then Story is going to be Mordecai, right? All right, you guys ready? We ready for this? Okay, we'll see how this goes. All right, you guys ready? Let's start. Here we go. Here we go. All right, so once upon a time, there was an evil king named Xerxes. Now, evil might be an overstatement, but if you do a little history search, you'll find that that's probably true. Now, Xerxes, like I've said, was a Persian king, and Xerxes had a beautiful wife. But I'm not talking about Esther. I'm talking about a woman named Vashti. Now, Vashti was stunningly beautiful, and one day, the king is having just this big party, and he and his friends are just going crazy, and they're drinking wine, and this goes not for 1 day or 2 days, or 3 days, but it goes for days and days and days. And so in the midst of this party and this big rager that they're throwing, he summons his wife, Vashti, to join the party. And he says, hey, Vashti, why don't you come? Actually, he sends his officials, tell my wife to come and dance in front of all my friends. And so Vashti gets word of this, and she's like, no, I'm not doing that. You're not gonna bring me in and showboat me in front of all your friends. This is craziness, absolutely not. And Xerxes is ticked. He's not having it. He's like, what? She said no? Hold on a sec, that is not gonna fly. So he goes to his officials. He's like, what should I do? And they're like, well, we gotta set some sort of precedence here, king. But if she thinks she's gonna say no to you, then what are our wives gonna say? No, sir. And so he puts out a pretty harsh thing. He says, hey, Vashti, peace, you're gone. And he exiles her, okay? And so, again, not a great guy. But then the king starts getting a little bit lonely. He starts to long for some companionship. And his officials notice it, and they come to him and they say, hey, king, we notice you're a little lonely. How about we do this? How about we throw like a big beauty pageant? And the winner of the beauty pageant will become your next queen. And so there were 127 provinces in all of Persia, and women from all these different provinces came in. It was this big whole ordeal. It took a year of rituals and making sure your skin was just the right softness and all this stuff before you could even see the king. And this is where Esther comes in. Beautiful Esther, right? And so Esther is brought, just this ordinary, very beautiful, but ordinary woman comes in, and she is brought in to be a part of this beauty pageant. So you got to do your thing. So what do you do? So she's gonna do her walk, right? And so she's doing that walk. Look at that walk. Okay. And so all right, that's good. Okay, she's doing that walk. Keep that going, Jay. All right, and so Esther's in this beauty pageant. Like I said, it takes a while though. And so here's our guy Mordecai, and Mordecai, come on, baby. Here, let's do one of these, okay? I don't know why I did that. Okay, now Mordecai is a nervous wreck because Mordecai is Esther's like uncle and like father figure, and Mordecai's like, I can't believe this. The last queen just got exiled because she didn't just come when she was summoned. I'm really nervous. So Mordecai is just kind of like pacing back and forth in front of the king's gate, in front of the palace, just pacing. Story, look really nervous. Like he's nervous. Chew your nails a little bit, okay? Just like nervous, and so just back and forth. And while Mordecai is going back and forth, just pacing in front of the gate, he hears this news. He hears this news that there are a couple of dudes that are like conspiring to kill the king, right? So like, here's that news, right? Hey, I want to kill the king. And she's like, what? And so she goes and tells some officials, and it gets back to the king, and the king's life is saved, and those guys are dealt with, and the king is like, this is really great. This guy Mordecai, you keep doing your thing. You're in this beauty pageant. It lasts a year, so you're doing a lot of this, okay? And so Mordecai is like, his name is written into the king's journal, into his chronicles, so that the king would remember this crazy thing, this awesome thing that Mordecai did. But then the journal's closed and the king doesn't really think much of it, okay? So you're still nervous though, because this lasts for a year. She's doing her thing. You're nervous for a really long time. You're just pacing. And this is where Haman comes into the story. Everyone say Haman. Very evil Haman, okay? So Haman comes in. Let's try and make you look evil. Okay, so Haman comes in. Okay, now Haman is the king's like number 2, like I said. And the king likes Haman because he's good at what he does. And he's evil and he does what he's told, right? But he also walks with authority and he listens to the king's influence, right? And so the king says, Haman, I want you to go around, just walk around town and people are gonna bow down and they're gonna recognize you. And so Haman's walking around, everyone's like, oh, Haman, we respect you. And then Haman gets to Mordecai. And Mordecai's like, I'm not bowing down to you, man. No way. Now, there are some theologians and scholars that'll say it was because Haman wore this idol around his neck, and Mordecai was like, no, I'm not bowing down to that. Or maybe he just didn't want to bow down to anyone but God. Or maybe there could be a lot of different reasons, but this made Haman mad. Like, he is ticked. Look mad. Be mad. Good. And Mordecai's like, whatever. Okay. And so Haman is so mad. So Haman says to Mordecai, like, look, man, I'm going to kill you. And I'm going to kill all the people like you, all the Jews. They're going down. And this is it. And so Haman is committed to this. Now, all the while this is going on, Esther finally gets through the process and she is chosen as the queen. So beautiful. Oh my goodness gracious. Okay? And so she is chosen as the queen of Persia. Now this is a big deal because while that's all happening, Haman, come here. Haman comes to the king and Haman's like, hey, these Jews are really pesky, and he's being a little manipulative, kind of withholding some things. He's like, I think we should get rid of them. King, are you cool with that? So you're saying that to me. And the king's like, whatever, I'm kind of disconnected. I don't know what's going on. Sure, okay? And so now an edict has been signed by the king that can never be taken back. It can never be overturned. It is like written in stone, put on the calendar. This is the day where we're going to kill all the Jews. And Haman's been behind all of it. So now Mordecai comes back into the picture. And Mordecai meets with Esther. And Mordecai's like, Esther, you got to know, there's this thing that's going on. Haman, I didn't bow down to him. I just couldn't do it. He's just not a nice guy, okay? And listen, because of that, he's trying to kill all the Jews now. And Esther, we're Jewish. Yeah. Put your hands on her. Okay. And it was... You put your hand here. Okay. And you're Jewish and I'm Jewish. He's going to kill all the Jews. And so Esther, you can get to the king and just hug. Just hug. Just hug. Just hug. Okay. Can someone take a picture of this really quick of them hugging? Okay. And so you have to go to the king. And this is the line that's famous from this story, right? Where Esther's like, who am I? I just became the queen. I'm nobody. But then Mordecai says, but you could have been put in this situation for such a time as this, right? And so now Mordecai has talked Esther into it. And so now Esther gets up the nerve and she comes to the king, her new husband, and she says, King. And he says, yes, my sweet, sweet girl, wife. And she says, King, how are you? And he says, what do you want? You're so beautiful. I'll give you anything in the whole kingdom that you would want, right? And she says, could we just do dinner, you, me, and Haman? That's what she wants, right? And so then it happens. The queen and Haman have dinner together. The queen and Haman have dinner together. And the queen, Haman, and the king. And they're having dinner together. And while they're having dinner, here's the king again. And the king says, oh, my beautiful, beautiful bride. Is there anything that I could do for you? And she says, you know what? Could we just do dinner tomorrow night too? Good. Yeah. Okay. So he says, yeah, that'd be great. And so now she goes on her way. And then here's Haman. And Haman's on cloud 9 because Haman's like, listen, I'm second in command of the kingdom. I've got the king feeling good about me. Even the queen is inviting me to have dinner with just the two of them. And Haman is feeling good. And so he's like kind of walking around, feeling pretty good. And as he's walking back to his house, he runs into Mordecai again. And what happens? Mordecai doesn't bow down. Just the simple motion, just him seeing Mordecai, he's like, I can't stand this guy. And even more, he wants to kill Mordecai. So Haman gets back to his house and he says to his wife, he says, I can't stand Mordecai. I can't wait to kill him. I can't wait to kill all the Jews. It's all I want, right? You gotta look angry, okay? Yes, okay, right? She's like, I just want, and so Haman's wife is like, you know what you should do, Haman? You should build a big 75-foot pole. That's what we should do. And then we're gonna build this pole. We'll put it right in our front yard. Get the boys to help you, okay? And so he and his 10 sons build this big 75-foot pole. And she says, here's what you should do. When the day comes and you get to kill Mordecai, impale him on the top of the pole. And it'll be kind of like a nice Christmas decoration that we have in the front yard, okay? And so Haman's all about it. He gets his 10 boys in on it. They build this, have some good family camaraderie over this impaling pole that they're putting in their front yard. And there it is, right? It's up and it's ready to go. And then that night, the king is having trouble sleeping. And so he motions for his officials to bring in his journal, the Chronicles. He says, just read me something out of it so I can fall asleep. And they open to the page where it tells of Mordecai saving his life. And he says, I can't believe I forgot this guy. Mordecai. What happened to Mordecai? Well, he's always pacing out in front of the gate. Man, we got to honor Mordecai. And so the next day, Haman comes in, and the king is like, Haman, what would you do for someone who saved your life, who's been so good to you, who's proven to be just a really, really good guy? And Haman thinks he's talking about him, and he's like, I'd dress him up in the finest clothes. I'd take him throughout the city and have everyone sort of celebrate him. And so the king's like, yes. And so that's what the king does, and he dresses Mordecai up in some really cute overalls and Birkenstocks, and they go through the city, and he's being recognized, and everyone's like, good job, Mordecai. And this makes Haman even more mad. Haman is like fuming. So mad. She said, so mad, so mad. And so that night, Esther and the king and Haman have their second meal together. And the king looks at Esther, and he says, my sweet Esther, you're so beautiful. Anything in the whole kingdom, I'll give it to you. And here's what happens. We'll just read it from the text. This is Esther chapter 7. So the king and Haman went to Queen Esther's banquet. And as they were drinking wine on the second day, the king again asked, Queen Esther, what is your petition? It will be given you. What is your request? Even up to half the kingdom, it will be granted. Then Queen Esther answered, if I found favor with you, your majesty, and if it pleases you, grant me my life. This is my petition, and spare my people. This is my request. One thing I forgot to mention is Mordecai tells Esther, before all this starts, he says, hey, maybe don't tell the king that you're Jewish. Let's keep that between us, okay? And so the king doesn't even know this. And so this edict that's been put out to kill all the Jews is going to kill his own wife. So again, she says, your majesty, if it pleases you, grant me my life. This is my petition, and spare my people. This is my request, for I and my people have been sold to be destroyed, killed, and annihilated. If we had merely been sold as male and female slaves, I would have kept quiet, which is pretty harsh, right? But she said, I would have kept quiet in that situation because no distress would justify disturbing the king. King Xerxes asked Queen Esther, who is he? Where is he? The man who has dared to do such a thing. Who is this evil person that's manipulated me? And Esther said, an adversary, an enemy, this vile Haman. Dun, dun, dun. Sorry, she's very sweet, actually. Then Haman was terrified before the king and queen. The king got up in a rage, left his wine, and went out into the palace garden. But Haman, realizing the king had already decided his fate, stayed behind to beg Queen Esther for his life. So Haman's like freaking out. He's begging Queen Esther. And just as the king returned from the palace garden to the banquet hall, Haman was falling onto the couch where Esther was reclining. So this is just unfortunate timing, right? He's begging for his life, and then Haman trips and falls on top of Queen Esther, who's laying on the couch, and the king comes in at that very moment. He says, we won't use that word for the kids at home. Are you even trying to like kiss up on my wife? What's going on here? And the king he's done with it. As soon as the word left the king's mouth, they covered Haman's face. Then Harbona, one of the eunuchs attending the king, said, "Oh, hey, a pole reaching to the height of 50 cubits stands in Haman's house. He had it set up for Mordecai, who spoke up to the king." Remember Mordecai when he did that? Yeah. So the king said, "Impale him on it." So they impaled Haman on the pole. That was, okay. This is a very heavy moment in the reenactment. So they impaled Haman on the pole he had set up for Mordecai. Then the king's fury subsided. So we're not totally done with the story, but they're done, okay? So can we just hear it? You guys want to bow for them? Good job. All right, thank you guys, good job. So here's sort of a tricky element in the story, though, is when an edict had been signed in the Persian Empire, is it couldn't be taken back. The king didn't even have the power to overwrite an edict that he put in place. And so when Haman is executed, who does Xerxes put into power, into that position? Mordecai. And the first thing Mordecai does is he goes to the king, and together they sign a new edict that although this day is coming when soldiers are going to come and try to kill all the Jews, they sign a new edict that arms the Jews and that reinforces them and gives them the ability to defend themselves, and they do that. And Mordecai kind of becomes a hero. Esther is the queen. And here's what we see. Here's how the story ends. This is the 10th chapter. It says, King Xerxes imposed tribute throughout the empire to its distant shores. And all his acts of power and might, together with a full account of the greatness of Mordecai, whom the king had promoted, are they not written in the book of the annals of the kings of Media and Persia? Mordecai, the Jew, was second in rank to King Xerxes, preeminent among the Jews, and held in high esteem by his many fellow Jews because he worked for the good of his people and spoke up for the welfare of all the Jews. Mordecai is just a guy. Esther's just a girl. And this uncle and his niece save an entire people group because they're willing to do a few things. And so here's where we get practical. I just want to close just with 4 things here this morning. These are 4 things that I believe make up an ordinary hero. And some of these things we might get into a little bit deeper as we go throughout the series, but this is not just a story that's fun to reenact with your kids. This is a story that I think for you and me is challenging and convicting, again, in 4 different ways. See, here's the first thing. If you're trying to ask the question, how do I live life as an ordinary hero? Let's start here. Ordinary heroes do what's right. Pretty simple, but not always. Because you and I are presented with opportunities every moment to do the wrong thing. We're presented with temptations all the time to do the wrong thing. Ordinary heroes, though, are willing to step into doing the right thing. I think of Mordecai pacing back and forth in front of the gate. Mordecai the Jew with a Persian king. And yet, when Mordecai hears word that the king, there's a conspiracy to have him killed, or not a conspiracy, but a work behind the, like there's rumblings or rumors that this could be happening. He's like, I got to do something. I got to tell somebody, and he does. He does the right thing. He doesn't owe anything to this king. He just does the right thing. Here's another thing that we find about ordinary heroes is that they're courageous. When I think of Esther, I can't even fathom how much courage she had to have. Think about this. The last queen, she's just a throwaway in the first chapter of the book of Esther. Vashti is her name. She's exiled because she refuses to come dance in front of the king and his friends. She's exiled because it's humiliating to the king. this is what Esther is getting herself into? You don't think she knows about all this? You don't think, like she has to be terrified. A year-long process to sit there and to think, what's gonna happen? What's gonna become of me? If I say the wrong thing, is he gonna have me killed? This is terrifying, and yet she's courageous. She stands tall. She steps into the opportunities before her. For you and I, these are simple principles, but we're presented with opportunities all the time to do the courageous thing or to do maybe the easy thing. Be courageous. Here's the third thing we find in the text. I think this is so significant. Ordinary heroes are wise. See, Esther's known for her beauty. Again, she's just an ordinary person other than this beauty that she has. But here's one thing that I think we sometimes don't recognize is how wise she is. Do you notice this? I'll even get into it a little bit more. It was illegal. You could not come to the king unless you were summoned. This is why she's so nervous when Mordecai comes to her and says, you need to talk to the king. She's like, I don't know how. I don't know how to do this. And so she has to walk with so much wisdom. And so she kind of like puts herself in a position where he sees her. And then the text says he sort of holds his scepter up or holds his whatever, the thing up. And then she's like, okay, and this is him welcoming her into his presence. So then he comes in. And this is the moment where maybe if it's you or me and we're not being wise and we're not being patient, he says, anything you want, Esther, I'll give you anything you want. And this is the moment where a lot of you and I would say, kill Haman. But she's not there yet. She doesn't have the respect of her husband yet. He doesn't really know her yet, right? And so she, with wisdom, just says, hey, could we just have dinner? Just you, me, Haman. And then this night comes where they have dinner together. This is the moment where, again, some of us, we'd be like, oh, hey, here's what I'm asking for, king. He says, you can have anything you want in the entire kingdom. This is where a lot of us would say, kill that guy Haman that's sitting right next to me. But she doesn't. He says, you can have anything in the whole kingdom. And here's what she says. She says, could we do dinner again tomorrow? Just the three of us. She's so wise in how she walks it out. And the king is pleased by this request because she doesn't ask for half of the kingdom. She's not asking for anything elaborate. She's not asking for people to be beheaded or killed or anything. And then finally, that last meal comes, that last banquet. And this is the moment where she reveals everything. But even in that, she never says, kill Haman. She asks for her life to be spared and for the life of the Jews to be spared. And the king recognizes the bigger thing at play and the one who's behind it. She's wise. Ordinary heroes are wise. One of the things that I pray for the most, pretty regularly, is that I would be wise. I certainly don't think I'm there yet. But one of the things that I've talked about this before, like I want to be the kind of like grandpa someday that'll have a little study in his house. And I'll sit and I'll have my bifocals on. I want to be the kind of grandpa, like when my grandkids will come in and sit down and ask me for advice. Because I exude some amount of wisdom. I think wisdom is this highly underrated attribute in our society today where everything's impulsive. We just shoot off on everything. To stop and speak with wisdom. Man, it's powerful. Here's the last thing. Ordinary heroes aren't looking for acknowledgement. This one, we can almost miss it, but this is big. Meaning this, ordinary heroes just walk in humility. Again, Mordecai pacing in front of the king's gate, stressed because Esther's inside and Esther's, going through this whole, beauty pageant type thing, and he's just stressed out because he loves Esther and he wants the best for her, and he's just going back and forth and he's stressed. And then he hears this rumor about the king being killed, and he saves the king's life. And what doesn't the king do? At that moment, the king doesn't take him out and walk him through the streets, reward him with a lot of money. He doesn't give him fine clothes in this moment. He says, hey, write this down in my chronicles, write this down in my journal, and then the pages are shut and there's nothing else. Mordecai is never acknowledged for saving the king initially. It's not till the king is having trouble sleeping later that he has someone read it to him, and he's like, oh yeah, I forgot about that. We need to celebrate Mordecai. But Mordecai never goes looking for it. He doesn't save the king's life and then knock on the door for the next 10 days like, hey, remember the thing I did for you? He's just living this humble life. He's not looking for acknowledgement. And again, I think there's significance to that. I think there's something really beautiful about that. He's just a normal guy trying to do the right things, trying to be wise. And here's a really interesting thing about the book of Esther is it's the only book in the Bible where God isn't referenced one time. Not once. But here's what we see throughout the entire story is that God's hand is in all of it. And God blesses this ordinary guy, Mordecai, and God blesses this ordinary girl, Esther. And they save an entire people group because they're courageous, because they're humble, because they're wise, because they're willing to do the right thing. So in just a minute, I'm going to tell you about a couple guys. They're a part of our disability ministry and part of our day services team here at the church. But before we do that, I want to put one challenge in front of you. Like I said, in a couple weeks here, we're going to be voting on all sorts of things in our country. It's a pretty significant season. We're also trying to navigate a pandemic. We're also trying to navigate about, 50 other things, it feels like. And so we did this a few months back, and we thought, man, this is a great time to step into this again. Starting next Sunday, on November 1st, we're going to have a 24-hour prayer time. We want to bathe 24 consecutive hours in prayer for our country, for COVID, for our president, for our leaders, for if it's going to be our next president, for whatever. We just want to cover this next season in prayer. And so here's my challenge to you is I want you to go and I want you to sign up to be a part of that. You could just take an increment of that, and then you're just going to, at that time, whether it's from like 1 to 1:30 a.m. or from 3 to 3:30 p.m. or whatever, on the first into the second, we're just gonna ask you to pray at that time. You can pick your time, but we're gonna ask you to pray in that moment. And it's gonna be 24 hours of consecutive prayer. You can find out more at hub.firstchristian.com, or you can go to firstchristian.com/prayer to sign up for that. I think one of the most significant places to start and just trying to be an ordinary hero is going to the real hero and asking for his hand to be present. Hey, thanks so much for tuning in with us. If you'd like to know more about what it looks like to take a next step here at First Christian Church, we'd love to walk with you in that. You can learn more at hub.firstchristian.com.